what I want to know is, where do you think God steps into the system, assuming that God is a supernatural entity of some sort, maybe outside of space and time. But to effect change in this world, at some point, he has to stick his finger into the particles and stir them up of some kind. Your book ends with a magnificent last 3 pages that is rivals to anything Sagan's written. It's a beautiful thing about 2 particles, 4 forces, leptons and quarks, and weak and strong nuclear force, electromagnetism, and gravity, boom. And he explains everything that ever happened in 3 pages with 2 particles and 4 forces, and I'm reading this going, oh my God, he's going to end up right where I ended up. And yet you don't. Where did God like pack that into the laws of nature at the beginning, and that's sort of had to unravel that way? Or does he step in every once in a while?
Well, the Templeton Foundation has funded a lot of research, and Bob Russell edited a big 10-volume set on that question. But for me personally, I like to think of the analogy of human intentionality as maybe the way to understand divine action. That we don't know how human intentionality works. I mean, you were invited to come here, and you decided that you would, and so on, and somehow in your mind a plan emerged, and you changed the world around you. You got onto a plane and into a taxi, and here you are now, and so on. And we don't know how that originates. There's something sort of deeply mysterious that somehow it doesn't really look like you can account for human behavior by saying it's all the consequence of prior causal streams just coming together. Somehow there's a way that you are able to manipulate the world without violating the laws of chemistry and physics and do things, get yourself from California to New York. So maybe someday we will understand that well enough to say there's absolutely no way that God could interact with the world like that. But right now, it just seems to me that that God's interaction with the world doesn't need to be any more mysterious than our interaction with the world.
I mean, in your book, you seem to reject all the places where creationists think God intervenes, at the Cambrian explosion, or the rise of complex bodies, but maybe you'd stop at consciousness. Would you say consciousness is because intentionality here you're talking about, is this a gap that God is filling?
Well, I'm very, very leery of gaps. I mean, the history of the gaps is they all fill in.
Yep, you rejected that.
So I don't want to just kind of go and find the last remaining gap and hide in it. So I wouldn't want to say that, but I kind of suspect that there's something deep about consciousness that we just don't get. I mean, I read Daniel Dennett's book, and it was just very unsatisfying. And most of these things are very unsatisfying. I mean, when you get done with them, they just don't seem to satisfy the mystery of your own experience. I mean, like, you sit and reflect on your own conscious experience, and then you read a book that describes it, and you just think, that's not it. So I feel like there's going to be a radical paradigm shift if we ever do get to the point where we can talk intelligibly about consciousness, and it may be when we do that we'll have an understanding that we'll say, here's how mind works in the world. And that may seem very obvious, that if there is a creator and a cosmic mind that is in and through everything, that perhaps that is the same mechanism that we can see that God's intentionality gets executed in the natural world.